Darlene Morgan here. So today we're going to talk about when to contact a trust and estates attorney. And sometimes it's obvious, especially if there's an illness or advancing age. People then tend to more naturally think about doing their estate planning. Seniors often are thinking about it a lot more than younger people. But while some situations are more urgent than others, there are some indicators. They're kind of like life phases where people tend to consider whether they need to meet with an estate planning lawyer. So, as I mentioned, advancing age is usually one time when clients start to think about estate planning. It's usually about when people are retiring, that they often start to get their ducks in a row for that next phase of life. And they pull out either sometimes an outdated estate plan that they did many years ago, or sometimes for the very first time realize we need to get this in place. So they've spent their whole lives working toward retirement, and here they are, and that is often a time when people think about updating or starting their estate plan when they're starting to go through retirement. On the opposite end of the spectrum, a lot of times people start thinking about contacting a trust and estates lawyer when they have their first child. I know that, when that new baby comes along and your whole life changes, and you start thinking about how much responsibility you have for this little human being, that's a time when people think, oh my gosh, if something happened to me, what is going to happen to my child? So that is a very important time when we start thinking about how would your assets get to your kids if they're under 18? Who would raise them if something happened to you? That's called naming guardians. And making sure that your kids would always be in the hands of the right people and that they would have the right amount of money available to them for all of their needs, but perhaps protected as well. So another time or a phase when people often contact their trust and estates lawyer tends to be when their kids are about college age. So a lot of times that, whether it be that they're starting to reassess their finances because they're starting to pay for college, or if they're realizing that their kids are now young adults and that they need different kinds of protections in place. Sometimes as young adults, they've seen their kids, who they're dating or who they're considering marrying, and that spurs them to update their estate plan. But that is a time of life when parents often will reconsider their estate plan. Another eye-opening situation when people often will contact a trust and estates attorney is when they start caring for their own aging parents. This tends to be a time when they're thinking about getting their parents' documents updated, making sure that those documents aren't stale, making sure those documents will work when they need them. And it's like I said, an eye-opening time when people are really thinking about the responsibility that comes from the realization that they are transitioning into caring for their aging parents and what all that responsibility means and what it entails. So they often are making sure that mom or dad's documents are all updated, as well as making sure that their own documents are updated. Another time of life, obviously, when people connect with a trust and estates attorney is when they're facing a major illness. And of course, that's the hardest time to come in. You really always want to try to plan in advance of a crisis, because planning when you're in crisis mode, you're not thinking clearly, and that's, as hard as estate planning is on a good day, it is much, much harder to plan when you're in crisis mode. But obviously that is a very common time when people are making sure that we're facing a major illness. We got to make sure everything is completely in place and up to date and will work when we need it to work. So if you're facing any of these life transitions that require estate planning, please consider contacting us, and we would be delighted to work with you as your trust and estates attorney.